Hey, what's going on? It's been a while since I've done a new video. With my new job and with the hours. I just don't feel like doing stuff anymore. But let's go ahead and do another video on Faraday Speaks, because even though this subject is about like 3 months old now, um, it's something I've been sitting on for a while, and I have a few other video ideas I've been sitting on for a while that I just haven't got to. So let's just get the ball rolling, and maybe I can get back into the habit of making YouTube videos, because let's go ahead and get into this and break down how well Faraday Speaks just has the Groypers figured out.
Hey guys, Faraday here. So I just wanted to talk about the recent events with Nick Fuentes and Turning Points USA. So what happened was Nick Fuentes showed up at a Turning Points USA event called Culture War. And at that event, he was highly critical of Israel, immigration, and conservative stances on the LGBT community. After a chain of events, Nick Fuentes was booted from the convention and went to social media and to his platform to rile up his base and essentially start a war against the conservative movement. And this all culminated in an AMA where Rob Smith and Charlie Kirk defended themselves against a swarm of groypers asking questions ranging from everything from 9/11 conspiracy theories involving the Jews.
Now here's something that you probably noticed that he loves to do a lot. He'll just throw stuff out there but not explain it, not try to debunk it, not explain the context. He just sort of throws it out there and says, yeah, these conspiracy theories about the Jews. I mean, have you ever really thought to take the time to actually be objective and actually search for and see what kind of information you can find about it? He's not going to explain himself either. You'll see what I'm talking about as the video goes on. He loves to just throw shit out there and then not explain anything and not even really try to take an objective look at it. He just sort of rolls on.
Nick's criticisms of Charlie Kirk have essentially been him calling him a grifter and saying that Charlie is more concerned with money and fame than he is with actually building out a conservative movement that represents conservative people.
Maybe he's not a grifter. Maybe it's just really a coincidence and really suspicious that all of his talking points match the agendas of all of his big mega $1 million donors.
You know, personally, in terms of Nick, I'd always kind of underestimated the dude. I watched the debates he did with Destiny, I've watched some of his content before, and I never really thought much of the guy. I thought he was just, another right-wing grifter or just another right-wing personality that didn't really need to be taken that seriously. But I think recent events have kind of shown otherwise.
The guy really loves just running that term into the ground, grifter. Everybody that he disagrees with, who's on the right, that he doesn't like, it's automatically by default a grifter. What's also interesting is that he just admitted that he's only ever watched maybe like a couple of videos of him, but now he's going to go on and explain how he's an expert on his views.
Nick's position within the far right has actually been pretty interesting if you look at it. He's positioned himself, what he's done essentially is position himself between the very extremes of the far right and between the conservative movement, acting as almost a springboard. Whereas someone like Stefan Molyneux or Lawrence Southern dog whistle a lot to the far right, Nick is a much more direct intermediary where he can funnel people from conservative movement into ethno-nationalism, white nationalism, which Nick is a self-avowed white nationalist. And so he can be a springboard from softer ideologies into more extreme ideologies much more quickly, and to be honest, much more honestly than a figure like Molyneux or Southern.
So we all know that the thing that he said about Nick Fuentes being a white nationalist, he addresses that in the other video, obviously, and we'll get to that. But the other thing that's interesting about this is, and this is something he does all the time that's just completely fucking retarded and proves that he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. So everything that's right-wing is just a certain degree of neo-Nazi. It couldn't be that maybe there are genuine differences between these groups and different right-wing ideologies. You're with the alt-right, that makes you like 90% neo-Nazi, or maybe you're over in the basic conservative right, which would be like 10% neo-Nazi. It's just a completely retarded framing.
The reason he's had to position himself in the middle is for a couple reasons. So with the alt-right, they really didn't take him in I mean, from what I understand, it was because his name, Fuentes, and the fact that he shares Hispanic heritage.
I mean, that's obviously just goofy as fuck. The the split between Nick Fuentes and the Spencer rights groups were because of very obviously and very clearly explained political and ideological differences. For example, in regards with religion and also with handling racial relations, such as, for example, at the time, the Spencer crowd was talking about wanting to set up a literal ethno-state, while the Quintus side was talking about just securing immigration in a way that is not being used as a tool that's literally changing the demographic of the country. It's a pretty obvious difference between having a tighter control on immigration and setting up a literal ethno-state. I mean, do I really have to explain how that's different? And you would think like his big shtick is that he was just so ingrained into the alt right. You know, he was a guy on the inside, so he gets it, right? He gets the alt right. He was on the inside. Why is it that he just has no idea what the fuck he's talking about on any of this shit? I mean, he was supposedly in the alt. He was like knee deep. He was like neck deep in the alt right during this time. So why why does he not know anything about any of the stuff that he gets so wrong all the time that went on while he was in the alt right? It doesn't make any sense.
Now, interestingly, another figure that was at the AMA was Patrick Casey, who is the head of the American Identity Movement. Now, if you've been paying attention for long, you know that the American Identity Movement is a rebranding of Identity Europa, a neo-Nazi organization, essentially, that was very active at Charlottesville and was very active during the Trump campaign. They eventually saw a rebranding and took a big hit after Charlottesville because it was shown that they had leaked Discord messages showing a lot of their anti-Semitism, a lot of their racism, and their true intentions.
Now, I don't really know much about Identity Europa and Patrick Casey. I knew it was a thing and it was like an identitarian movement thing, but you know, I'm not going to speak for them because I don't even know that much about what their views are. But it's funny how he uses that to define Nick Fuentes' views, or like to explain like, well, this guy was in Identity Europa and they're a neo-Nazi group. Well, I mean, like, what do you mean by like explain that neo-Nazi? You just throw that out there. I'd like to see like what you would consider a neo-Nazi to be. Nick Fuentes did streams like where he covered the Groyper events and he laid down his views on like point by point in each video and explained what his views actually were. And he did that before you did these videos. He did these streams live as the stuff was going on. So there's literally no excuse for you to get all of this stuff completely wrong. If you weren't lazy, if you weren't so intellectually disingenuous, then you would have at least took the time to actually studied what his views were, or at least watched a couple of those streams, and you would have got at least half of this stuff.
My concern is that it's going to be successful. I think that they're going to see a lot of success with pulling conservatives into the far right through this method, because essentially what they're doing is, I mean, first of all, they're using a lot of tactics that they use against the left. They're using gaslighting.
I don't know if you know what gaslighting means. It'd be really nice if you would have posted an example or noted an example for the Groypers gaslit somebody.
They're using name calling. They've taken to calling the conservative movement Conservative Inc., you know, saying that they are only concerned with money and these things. And while I can see some truth to that, it's the same type of name calling and branding that we saw Donald Trump do. And I think it's a tactic that Trump really, you know, helped people focus on within the far right.
Also, I love this whole thing where it's like being quirky. Like when people on the right like say something quirky, it's a part of some kind of deep conspiracy to mess with the opponent's mind. You made a quirky comment, and it's a part of this dark, ominous tactic to get in under people's skin. Ooh, you made a quirky joke. Ooh, some kind of mind tactic.
While the alt-right continues to dissolve in post-Charlottesville drama, the optics movement is rising. And if they continue on this path, they're going to be quite successful.
First off, the reason why the alt-right is fizzling out was because, like, after a while you start to realize that just sitting around and talking about ethno-states all day, you start to realize that, you know, this shit is actually not going to get us anywhere. Talking about this shit isn't going to really solve anything, and it's just a total waste of time. It doesn't offer any kind of feasible solution, and so, you know, people start to get bored of it. I mean, you know, some of these shit show debates around it were pretty fun for the time, but it gets old. And also something that I've really noticed with, and let me preface this to explain like why I got into politics. I started getting into politics around the Libyan Civil War because, you know, you had all this stuff all over the news about how Gaddafi was slaughtering protesters, but when you would do just basic Google searches, you'd see the complete opposite. It was the rebels that were slaughtering people and lynching up black people and slaughtering people, and it was just crazy how the news media just completely ignored it. The Al-Qaeda ties that were very open with the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group and other members such as that we were aiding to overthrow Gaddafi, Abdelhakim Belhaj, Al-Hasidi, all of these, you know, known famous members, and the media completely ignored it. You had literal ethnic cleansing of black people taking place that was being done by the rebels that Barack Obama was financing, and they completely got away with it. They were bombing kids, doing airstrikes on kids to help the rebels take towns and stuff like that. It was insane. And I started going down a rabbit hole. When you begin to realize that between the Balfour Declaration of World War I all the way up to the Clean Break Memo with the stuff in the Middle East, you begin to realize that all of these wars that we had been fighting and all this stuff, all of this shit we've been getting involved in the Middle East, all the way back through World War II and World War I, it had to do with the same interests, it had to do with basically the same agenda, going back all the way straight through. It's all directly connected, and it just went down that rabbit hole. You know, people, you know, some people get into it and they start just going down a rabbit hole and dig, and you know, get more nuggets here and there of truth and information and just putting together the pieces. Faraday Speaks does something. His thing is sort of like a shtick. That's his motivation. It's a shtick. And the shtick is, it's similar to how the skeptic community used to do. You know how with the skeptic community, you would have like 5, and they would all talk about the same thing. Like when some kind of thing happened on Netflix, or there was some kind of, you know, cringy SJW thing that went on, they would all do a video on the same subject to give their 2 cents about it. But you know, there was always a shtick. Sean Head's shtick was she was the quirky girl. Blair White's shtick was that, you know,
Holy fish paste! It's a god!
and then you had some black guy. I mean, do I even need to say it? You get where I'm getting at. Faraday Speaks, his shtick is like, I'm the guy who was radicalized and I got out of it. And here's my 2 cents on this thing. You know, he's doing the same thing that they're doing. But it's just funny that all this stuff that he was so neck deep into in this ideology, and that he was just so in the inside crowd on, you know, listen to all these stuff, and he has no idea about what he's talking about on any of this stuff. It's a little fishy.